What's that book? It's me, Margaret. God, are you listening? Something like that. Like, it's me, Bourbon. Are you listening? Welcome to Savage Kitchen. I'm so excited about what we're doing today. If you follow me on Instagram, and I hope you do, go follow right now at savage.kitchen. I posted in my stories the other day a tale of two banana breads. And it garnered quite the reaction. I didn't know that people have such a deep, deep love for banana bread. I should have known I also have a deep love for banana bread. But what's special about this banana bread is that it has bourbon. Because many of the things I do have bourbon. I am partially comprised of bourbon. Today, we are making two kinds of banana bread, both with bourbon. Originally, I had tested both of these recipes thinking that I would just pick the winner and that's what I would make here for you. But I can't choose. It's like picking a favorite child. Like secretly you might have one, but at the end of the day, you have to tell everybody you love both of them equally. So we are going to be making a chocolate bourbon banana bread with a bourbon glaze. And then we are also going to be making a bacon bourbon banana bread, because why wouldn't we? The difference between the two flavor-wise, I would say maybe one is more of a breakfast banana bread, definitely perfect for a boozy brunch. And the other is a little bit more dessert heavy. The chocolate definitely gives off dessert vibes. So this recipe that I'm giving you and the measurements that I'm putting below are for one large banana bread loaf, but I'm actually dividing it into two smaller pans so I can make the two kinds, and you're welcome to do that too. So you can either have this recipe and just have like one little loaf of banana bread, but who wants that? Banana bread goes real fast. So I would say either use this recipe to make either one large loaf or two small loaves. However you want to make it, banana bread's pretty hard to screw up. The fact that I'm making it is amazing because if you know me, you know I don't bake. All evidence to the contrary, apparently. But this is super, super easy. So let's get into it. First, we are going to start with bananas. Yes, this is a banana. I actually force ripened these, and let me show you the difference. So this is the type of banana that you probably want to use for banana bread. It's spotted, it's like past ripe. These are the bananas I got at the grocery store this morning. I was like, well, you can't use fresh bananas in banana bread. So all I did was pop these fresh bananas in the oven, 400 degrees for about 10 minutes, and force ripened them. So a little trick, if you didn't know. So we're gonna take our bananas and just mash them with a fork. These are super liquidy because I forced them, this is going to affect the moisture content of the bread. So I might back off on the oil just a little bit. But like I said, however you make banana bread, make banana bread. And then with our wet ingredients, we're going to add 2 eggs. I'm always a little nervous cracking eggs into the bowl, so I tend to go into a separate bowl because I don't like picking shells out. And this way too, I'm just going to give them a little bit of a whip before I mix it in with the bananas. And now we're going to add a little bit of vanilla. If you want to add other spices, you can, but the point of these two banana breads is really to feature the bourbon. So if you get into adding nutmeg and cinnamon, I'm sure that's delicious, but it is going to take away from the bourbon just a tiny bit. We don't ever want to take away from bourbon. Bourbon is a giver. So now for our dry ingredients, we're just going to combine our 2 cups of flour to 1 cup of sugar. I like to use brown sugar in banana bread because that molasses content adds a little bit of moisture. So we're gonna have a really moist banana bread. And the flavor too has just like a little more of those warm caramel notes to it. To our dry ingredients, we're gonna add a teaspoon of baking powder. Just one, I'm just using the half teaspoon. And a pinch of salt. Which, you know, when you bake, you're supposed to be precise. That's why I'm not a baker. And then into our wet mixture, we're gonna fold everything in. And then we're gonna add our coconut oil. A lot of recipes call for butter or vegetable oil. I personally prefer coconut oil, just trying to be a tiny bit heart healthier, which is hilarious since we're topping one of these with bacon. But I think that the coconut oil leads to a little bit more of a moist bread, and clearly I'm all about moist banana bread, and has a just slight hint of coconut flavor, which is delightful. So half a cup of either coconut oil or butter or sunflower oil, canola oil, whatever kind of oil you want to use. So if you're wondering when the bourbon comes, it's now. This is my favorite part. You're going to take your favorite bourbon. I love Noble Oak. I use it a lot. I love, if y'all could see the shelf next to me, I love bourbon. I have a lot of bourbons. Noble Oak has been sort of my go-to for experimenting, for mixing in cocktails, for drinking at any occasion. It is absolutely delicious. And in this recipe, we are going to take a 1/4 cup of bourbon. Don't be scared. The bourbon told me it wants to be in the banana bread. So this morning, when my assistant came in and I had her taste the tester recipes on this, she said to me, what did you say to me? Who thinks about putting bourbon?
Something like that. Like, how'd you come up with the idea?
Yeah, she said to me, how'd you come up with the idea of putting bourbon in banana bread? I said, I didn't. The bourbon speaks to me. I am simply a conduit for the bourbon. The bourbon tells me where it wants to go, and I put it there. It wants to be in the banana bread, so we're going to put it there. So you're going to stir in a full 1/4 cup of bourbon. You could do less, but why? Any less, and I don't think you really get the benefit of the flavor. And also, the bourbon is not overwhelming in the bread part, in the cake part. We're going to be adding toppings to this that help accentuate that bourbon flavor. But if it's going to be bourbon banana bread, it's got to be in the bread. Also, you don't want to overmix your batter, because the more you mix the batter, it's going to be more dense. So you don't want to brick, or maybe you do, I don't know, no judgment. But you want to leave things maybe just like a tiny bit chunky so those bananas can kind of melt away and leave little pockets. And you want this to be a little bit light and fluffy, because in general, this is a dense bread. So just try not to overmix. Oh my God, that smells good. So we've preheated our oven to 350 degrees, and I have these 2 handy dandy disposable tins. So you can either line them with parchment paper. I like to just give them a little spray with some coconut oil. So now we're going to take half of our batter and pour it as is into one of our loaf pans. And now we're going to add the chocolate chips for our second batch. About half a cup of chocolate chips. You can do more. I'm not going to judge you. You can do less. I will judge you. I mean, what's the point of adding chocolate if it's not going to be really chocolatey? Oh my God, this is just happiness in a bowl. And now add this to our second loaf pan. Conduit for the bourbon. Maybe it's my calling in life. So now we're going to pop both of these in the oven for about an hour. We've got work to do in between, but 350 for about an hour, depending on your oven, and make sure to check them as we're getting towards the end. So while those are baking, we're going to work on our 2 toppings. 1 is a bourbon candied bacon, and 2 is a bourbon glaze to go over our chocolate banana bread. So you're going to dice up bacon pretty small, and we're going to cook this in a skillet. So once your bacon's just about as crispy as you want it, and for this I would say you do want it to have some crunch, because this is like a crumble on top of your bacon bread. Your banana bread, Freudian slip. You're gonna wanna remove it from the pan and drain off some of the grease. I have nothing against bacon grease, clearly. But for this recipe, since we're gonna be candying this bacon, you do wanna remove as much of the bacon fat as possible. However, if you are a fan of Savage Kitchen, you may have seen my video on how to fat wash bourbon with bacon. So do not throw this grease away. Save this for your fat washed bourbon. I'm going to put a link to that video up here. Trust, for fall, you're going to want a bacon old fashioned with your fat washed bourbon. Go ahead and let this drain a little bit, but now is the fun part. We are going to deglaze the pan with a little bit of bourbon. So I'm taking 2 ounces. Woo! Woo! Maybe let's go 4. Because the bourbon told me to. So in deglazing the pan, a lot of the alcohol is going to cook off. We're going to add some honey to this to thicken it, and that's going to add a little bit of sweetness to our bacon. So let that bourbon reduce for a minute, 2 minutes. So now to the bourbon, we're going to add some honey. Again, I'm just eyeballing it, but you want roughly equal portions of bourbon and honey. Now, while this is hot and simmering, it's going to thicken a little bit, but it's still going to be pretty liquidy. So don't worry, just go ahead and add your bacon back to the pan. And coat all of this lovely pork in this bourbon reduction. We're gonna let this hang out while we prepare our bourbon glaze for the chocolate banana bread. Okay, our bourbon glaze could not be easier. Take half a cup of powdered sugar, and then we're gonna take about 3 ounces of bourbon. Maybe a little more, just depends on how liquidy you want your glaze. So the reason you wanna use powdered sugar here is because powdered sugar actually has some cornstarch in it that's gonna help thicken this into a glaze. And you'll notice it actually gets a little bit of a, not hard shell, but hard enough to create a crust when it sits out in air for a little while. As we're coming to the end of our cooking time with the banana bread, for the last 10 minutes or so, you want to take your bacon banana bread, remove that from the oven, and add this topping and pop it back in the oven. You don't want to put this on before because the bacon's going to sink into the bread, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but the top of the bread also is going to burn with the sugar content from the honey. So just the last 10 minutes or so, you want to add the bacon to the bacon bourbon banana bread. Then for our chocolate banana bread, we're going to take this glaze, and after our bread has come out of the oven and sat on cooling racks for a little bit, we're going to pour this glaze over the banana bread. So I have here 2 loaves that we just cooked. I think we're going to start with the chocolate. I'm just going to cut a slice off here. So you can tell this is a really dense, moist, and delicious banana bread. If you want a fluffier bread, you can add more baking powder and the addition of baking soda, and maybe cut back on the oil a little bit, but I really like a really dense bread. Let's give this a taste. So good. Okay, let's try the bacon. It is so good. Oh my God. Cheers, friends.
What if you use the bacon grease?
It's as if I gave birth to you. I don't have children, but if I did, I imagine she would be a young Black lesbian who loves bacon.
Also vegan.
Who's also vegan.